All right, Jane, thanks so much for taking time to speak with us on the podcast today. And thank you so much for your work.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So, Citizens for a Safe and Clean Lake Superior, this is a relatively new organization. It was founded in 2020.
Mhm.
Um, and just like the name says, it's founded by citizens, by residents of the UP to protect Lake Superior. I'd love to hear more from you just about the founding of the organization and some recent history about it.
Yeah, sure. I personally am fairly new to the organization. I was a student at Northern when it was founded in 2020, and have been with it since last August. But back in 2020, yeah, like you said, it was formed by local residents in the area in response to the news of a spaceport that was planning to be built out on the lakeshore about 11 miles north of Marquette, in a pretty pristine and beautiful area. And those local residents, along with many other people here and around the world, were really shocked and hurt to see that type of industry being proposed here. So, yeah, a bunch of folks came together to A, put out a petition, and B, form this organization to kind of present an organized opposition to that spaceport. And since then, they were able to do some really important investigative research that brought to light some things about the spaceport that were shocking but not surprising, from the fact that it was a project that was being kind of kept under wraps from the public for a very long time. And the fact that it had not only catastrophic environmental threats associated with it, but also would not bring quite the economic benefits that it touted. CSCLS was able to do a few really important FOIA requests along the way, which is the Freedom of Information Act. You can pull public information um, that wouldn't otherwise be available to the public, and they uncovered a economic feasibility study done by the IQM Research Institute. This was in 2021, and that report basically said that a spaceport here, not only would it not be viable, but it would bring in about the annual revenue of two additional fast food restaurants or less. Um, and it would likely not get much launch or many potential launches, because of the 13 spaceports there are in the US, only 7 have seen a launch or a revenue producing launch in the last few years. So yeah, that was a really important turning point for the Stop the Rocket campaign. And following that, the organization didn't see as much pushback from the spaceport manufacturer. And we were able to push for a petition in Powell Township, which is where the spaceport would have been built. For them, we asked them to amend their zoning ordinance to specifically prohibit launch sites in the township, to make sure that this is never a threat that needs to be faced by the township. And we ended up gaining the petition signatures in support of 200 Powell Township residents, which is not significant compared to the change.org petition that has like 26,000 or more signatures. But in Powell Township, there are only 800 people who live there. So 200 is about a quarter of the population, which was really significant. And after some back and forth with the township, we decided that the best course of action would be to pass a resolution that stated that a spaceport would be incompatible with any current and future versions of the township zoning ordinance and master plan. So that resolution passed on November 21st last year, and signified, really the end of our Stop the Rocket campaign. And we're pretty confident that there won't be another threat like that in this area. And if there ever was to be, we've got the people and the community support to prevent it. which has been a really awesome thing to come into for me. I came in August, kind of in the middle of the petition effort, and got to see it through and really push it to the finish line, which was really awesome for me. But I also was working on trying to figure out what's next for this organization. I kind of saw like a timeline that could come to an end, but instead understood that this organization has the resources and the potential to do much more, and has a really important role to fill in advocating for our lakeshore, our watershed, and our people. The spaceport was the big thing for a long time, and now we're just starting to move into other advocacy efforts and other work in the community. So
That's fantastic. I love starting off an interview with good news, and this is great
yeah.
news. I remember hearing about this proposed rocket launch site just a stone's throw from Lake Superior, and it's like, oh, here we go again. A small group of wealthy individuals think that they can act with impunity and collude with government to create something that in their little bubble makes them cool, but it hurts so much. Like when I started looking at the projected numbers of all of the stuff that would be dumped into Lake Superior and the minimal economic benefit, it's just like, this makes no sense. And then thankfully, the word spread, and it spread all across the UP, across the Lower Peninsula, across the country. And the Stop the Rocket campaign worked. We stopped the rocket.
Yeah. It made our community feel very powerful and very capable of making that positive change. We've had a lot of environmental threats come our way that oftentimes have beat the local effort to stop them. But this was one case where, that didn't happen, which was really hopeful as a young person to see.
Yes, absolutely. So here we are now, 2024. We've passed the rocket campaign. I know that you're working on wetlands protection, and this is something that I've been tracking closely through Title Track. We're members of a caucus called the Water Equity and Climate Resilience Caucus that does a lot of federal policy work. So when the Sackett versus the EPA decision came through, it was a huge, devastating piece of news that sort of ruptured throughout the country of activists, because this represented sort of a collapse of wetlands protections and a huge amount of pressure put on groups like ours and the states to protect our wetlands because their rights have been stripped.
Absolutely.
And so I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're up to, and also just for you to be able to speak a little bit about the significance of wetlands and the purpose that they play in ecosystems in a larger perspective.
Yeah, so wetlands are one of the most amazing parts of an ecosystem and one of the most undervalued historically. But they essentially act as the kidneys of the ecosystem. So they filter rainwater and other water that comes in, they remove sediments and excess nutrients that could be caused by pollution. They also are able to act kind of like a sponge. So when a flooding event happens, they're able to hold excess water to prevent that flood from having effects on the surrounding environment. Coastal wetlands are really important because they prevent a lot of that coastal erosion that we're seeing so much along the Great Lakes right now. I really can't say enough to how important wetlands are, not only to the Earth's functions, but also like to all the life that they support. They offer really critical habitat for so many distinct species, and are able to, they're really like, I see wetlands as a type of a superhero because they can just do so many things, and are doing it, all the time and not receiving a lot of that. They're not getting, thank yous from our society. They've been historically undervalued, um, and filled for whatever it is, whether it's development, agriculture, industry. And so where CSCLS is starting to step in is following that Sackett decision last year, which was really unfortunate and heartbreaking. We then decided to take a closer look at Michigan's regulations on wetlands, and then also on the local level wetland regulations. And we saw that Michigan has fairly strong state regulations. So fortunately, the Sackett decision doesn't have that much of an impact here. However, what the Sackett decision did do is allow us to really scrutinize that state program and realize the places where it's falling. And so, yeah, looking at the state program, they regulate wetlands with a permitting system. So basically, you can impact a wetland, as long as you get the permit for it. So you basically just have to convince them that your impacts are worth it. And they only regulate wetlands. They have to be either over 5 acres in size or connected to one of the Great Lakes or inland lakes. And so that leaves out a very important, crucial piece of wetlands, which are our small and isolated wetlands, which can come in many shapes and sizes, but which are known to serve just the same amount of ecological function as a larger or more connected wetland. So those types of wetlands have no regulation under the state, and no regulation at all unless local governments step in to pass like a local wetland ordinance, which they're able to do, and which there is a lot of information out there to make it pretty easy for them to do so. So that would allow them to regulate those wetlands down to 2 acres in size and put a little bit more stipulations on what it takes in order to get that permit of approval, and just brings back the regulation to the people who are actually living in that community. So what we're doing here, and what we will be doing this coming year and perhaps beyond, is trying to get the word out about that, try to educate our community in Marquette County about, the importance, the function, and everything about wetlands and why they are so crucial to our environment, and start to help them also understand and help ourselves understand, why they've been under threat for so long and how we can prevent that in the future. And it really is going to come back to the local governmental control, over these permitting decisions and local government protection of these wetlands. So, yeah, we're really excited to get started on that project. And it's been interesting to talk to people because, wetlands have been overlooked and they still are overlooked. And so it's a little bit difficult so far to get people excited about doing work about wetlands, but we're hoping that, once we're able to get more into this education campaign, that we can really change people's minds and change their hearts.
Absolutely. I love that, nature's kidneys. That's a great, simple way to describe the purpose and function and necessity of wetlands.
Yeah, that I can't take credit for that. It's a pretty common way to,
Mhm.
make or make wetlands into an analogy. That it was first given to me by some folks from the regulatory agency Eagle when we met with them to talk about wetlands and the state of wetlands in Marquette County. So, yeah.
Great. And so there's a few other current priorities. I know the Tilden mine expansion is something that's been on the table, and there was just a big event recently around that. So could you tell our listeners a little bit about what that is and how you're approaching it?
Yeah, so we've been trying to stay involved with all of these horrific threats that are coming to the Superior watershed right now. And yeah, the Tilden mine is obviously one of them. So basically, the Tilden mine is an open pit iron mine in kind of the south central part of Marquette County. It's been operating since the 60s and has been absolutely catastrophic to the environment. You can see the tailings ponds from space. They're bright orange and they're enormous. And you can also see the waste rock stockpiles from the local climbing crag, Slugs Bluff, which is Michigan's first climb-your-own crag, and which I was climbing at last year and noticed, I could see both the tailings ponds and the waste rock stockpile. And I was like, I think that's an issue. So yeah, basically what they want to do is they want to expand the mine and they want to mine for 25 more years, this fairly low grade iron. And when you're mining low grade iron or low grade anything, there's a lot of waste, associated with that. So I think that the grade of the iron is 30%. So 70% of everything they're taking out of the ground has to be stored somewhere. And they're deciding that wetlands are the best place to store that. So they have applied for a permit from the regulatory agency to permanently fill 77.9 acres of wetlands and almost a mile of streams in the surrounding watershed adjacent to the mine's current footprint, which is again shocking but not surprising. And it takes the breath away of a lot of people who I talk to about this issue, because we see so much ecological importance in this area, from the variety of species of animals and plants that live and depend on that area, as well as just, the ever increasing footprint of these large pit mines that damage groundwater resources and have impacts on wellheads for the local communities and, the greater watershed in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we're feeling this tide turning over the last 20 years, really, it's been a battle. And the numbers are growing and the resistance movement is growing in terms of the UP not being regarded as this mining district where extractive industries, boom and bust operations are being forced upon the population, and people are struggling economically, so they'll just take whatever breadcrumbs they can get. That's not what's happening anymore. People are moving to the UP or visiting the UP from all over the world because it's one of the most pristine places left on Turtle Island. And thousands and thousands of people are standing up and saying no to these ideas because this is not our future. And the revenue that's produced from mining is dwarfed by the revenue that's produced by tourism. And there are all of these peripheral impacts that our leaders need to see. We need to bring forward to say, if you approve these mine projects and if you fund these mine projects, it absolutely crushes the dreams of people who have made this place their home. It crushes the faith that young people have, or people of all ages have, in our institutions being partners for us, and our elected representatives representing our desires and wishes and dreams. And so people power is growing and it's strengthening. And I remember 20 years ago, we had a lot of people power opposing the Rio Tinto mine, the Kennecott mine at Eagle Rock. Mm-hmm. And it was devastating when they pushed that through. But at the same time, that coalition remained, and all of the people that came together for that continued to work. And so now we're seeing, the benefits of this long-term movement work. And it's still a struggle, right? It's like I've been watching the Star Wars movies with my daughter who's 10, and we've been having great conversation about it, thinking about, wow, the Empire and the Resistance, what is this? Where do I, you know, where do I fall in all of this, you know? And even this morning we were talking about like, what it means to be a Jedi. And like, I really think about organizations like yours. This is Jedi work. It's like, we're going to come together and use our life force for the common good. And we're going to stand up to something that might be scary to people. But in doing so, we're modeling courage and spreading these waves of courage and hope and growing the resistance movement. Even if it seems small at times, it's powerful and it's having an impact. And sometimes people think of these larger entities, big government, big energy, big business in general as impenetrable, but it's not actually that hard to make them nervous and to kind of get under their skin, or to actually get to the tables where decisions are made and bring a different perspective, to bring a different narrative and a different voice. And the more you do this work, the more you actually get to know people that are part of state government and even federal government. And it really matters, just like it does in every other part of life, to build genuine relationships and to not have relationships be built around conflict. Because if I meet someone and we're in conflict from the moment we meet, it's a hard relationship to build. But when we spend time actually building relationships and finding common goals, it doesn't always work. But I've noticed that, when like the Michigan Strategic Fund, which is overseeing the potential grant that would be awarded to the Copperwood mine, over the years, I've actually gotten to know some of these folks, and I feel like I can have a conversation with them. And that's a great place to start from for them and for me. And it's not just sort of like conveying a different narrative to the people who are holding the purse strings or holding the policy strings. We have to take a variety of approaches. But I feel like this is a moment, and I'm heartened by it. And especially to see young folks like yourself in positions of leadership and power, bringing people together and bringing folks from your generation into this movement. It spreads hope, and it also, beyond hope is action, so hope without action is pretty empty, but hope can fuel action. And the more action that takes place, people start looking around. It's like, whoa, this petition has 15,000 signatures. Like, I'm going to tell everybody I know about it. And they do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really heartening to see the community response to these threats. And, for the Tilden expansion permit, the public comment period is now closed, but we were able to facilitate the opportunity for over 400 members of the public to make comments about that expansion where, they might not have beforehand, because there's, not very much media coverage around it. And the permit application is so long and convoluted, it's really difficult for people to digest that and be able to take the time out of their day, because there are so many fires that need to be put out all the time. And people are definitely tired, but I see a resilience in the community here and, throughout Michigan and throughout especially our young people. We aren't willing to stand down and allow this further destruction of the place that we call home and the place that gives us life, so.
Absolutely. So Jane, I'd love to hear a little bit about your own background and what brought you into this work and this role that you're in.
Sure. So, I am an alumni of Northern Michigan University. I went there and graduated in December of 2022 with a degree in environmental studies and sustainability. I am originally from downstate in Saginaw, which is an area kind of post-industrial now. And it wasn't an area that I felt I could connect, with my local environment in. And so when I first made the trip to come up to Marquette and the UP, I was so amazed and instantly fell in love with Lake Superior and all that she has to offer. And I knew that, environmental protection was something that I needed to do. And it feels like that's my role in this earth. And I think that everybody has their niche, their thing that they can do to help make the earth a better place. And I think that advocacy and policy is like my place. So, yeah, I spent a few years at Northern learning from some pretty awesome professors and also getting through the COVID pandemic, which, on one hand was really difficult and, made learning really hard and made connecting with others really hard. But it also gave me so many opportunities to get outside into my local environment, and really build that connection with the earth. So yeah, through college, I was able to lead some clubs and also do some work, getting involved with our local government and also just with our trails and everything, and trying to do the little we could as students. And now that, yeah, I don't know, when I graduated from college, I knew that Marquette was a place that I wanted to be, because there's a really strong sense of community here and a really strong connection with the lake here that I feel so drawn to, and don't ever want to give up. And so I knew I wanted to stay in Marquette after college, which is a pretty high ask for someone in, a fairly small piece of the economy. And so I spent a while looking for a job. I was actually considering leaving, and just barely got this job just before I hit my deadline to start looking at other places. So it really was a match made by the universe for me to be in this position. And I felt really fortunate since then. I am the only employee for this tiny nonprofit that, is in a very transitionary period. So I'm able to shape a lot of what we do, and, caring about these issues that are coming before us, is helping, or is really good for me, because I feel like I am able to take, a lot of tangible change or a lot of tangible like action on these issues, through the organization. So it's been really impactful for me, to be able to have a larger voice in this larger environmental movement, and to also be meeting all of these amazing folks, not including yourself, who have been in this fight for a long time and who have so much to teach me and to share, with the community, and just, yeah, continuing to build those connections. And I'm always learning, I'm very new to this position and to this field. And it's definitely been a wild ride so far. And I'm really excited for the future, so I can, continue to see out these threats and, continue to fight for our lakeshore.
Hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much for the path you've chosen and the work that you're doing. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit, potentially, um, we have listeners who are sort of thinking about their next moves, and all of us have choices to make in terms of our future and the way we apply ourselves, to not only making an impact in our communities, but to having a livelihood that supports our quality of life and our overall wellness. So
Yeah.
what have you noticed about your quality of life and the people that you're surrounded by, and that feeling um, of meaning in your life as you've continued down this path of doing this type of work?
Um, I mean, I won't lie, it's definitely really tough at times, seeing not one, but two mining threats, back to back, just after, we were like, yeah, we beat the rocket. This is great. And now, okay, we're continuously bombarded with these issues. So it's definitely um, not an easy life to live, being in the know and caring about these issues. But I think that being able to surround myself with the community that is present in Marquette and, the Great Lakes environmental movement has been really impactful. I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of struggling to answer your question because I feel like my quality of life is given to me like by the lake. I think that spending time out in nature and being so close to nature has been um, a very important piece to allow me to keep going in these fights. And I think that it's really easy to get bogged down in what's going on in the world right now. But yeah, trying to keep hope and understand that, the birds are still singing and the waves are still crashing and there are constants that we can continue to rely on and learn from. Um, you know, that's been that's been really crucial to my well-being, over the
Yeah.
last few years. Yeah, is that kind of what you were looking for? Like, I feel like I have kind of a tough, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if that was exactly the right type of answer.
Oh, and, it's whatever's true to you, it is hard. It's very hard work. And I think about it a lot. I think about how I can be most effective and what it would be like if I had chosen different paths. And
Mhm.
I knew I had decisions to make early in life. I was interested in acting and music, and I knew that I wanted to do um, change work, and I knew that the arts and storytelling and narrative work, it was essential to that because we need our cultural values and our narratives shape the decisions we make around policy and building communities. Um, and then also, I I feel really compelled to be involved in policy work. And I know that there's a limit to what I can do just as a songwriter, and that if I apply myself to community organizing and policy, that's another really important piece of the puzzle. And then I also think that people who provide really important services to us, like dentists and nurses, like we need people in these professions. But folks like that can also be involved in the work that we do and are. So when it comes time for a public comment session, you and we do feel this pressure and this responsibility to get the word out, try to bring as many people as possible. And then for me, even going back to Kennecott, honestly, we didn't know which way it was going to go, and it didn't go the way we wanted. But when we rallied people for those public comment sessions and listened to what they had to say, people from all walks of life from all over the state, that made me feel like I'm with my people, you know, like this work is hard, and it's more than hard. It can be absolutely devastating. But at the same time, I'm going to do another movie reference. It's The Matrix. It's like you got to choose the pill that wakes you up, you know,
Mhm.
and 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 it can be scary to actually find yourself on the front lines too, because some of these other industries, it takes a long time, and there's gatekeepers, and there's actually competitive aspects of it that keep people from advancing in their field, because of people who've been there longer, sort of gatekeeping and seeing, up and coming young folks as competition. But it's absolutely the opposite with environmental work. And I found myself being brought in to meetings and to staying at the houses of absolute heroes in the environmental movement, and they were so excited that I was here and that I was serious about the work, and gave me all these opportunities to not only be involved in the work, but to be a leader in the work. And I remember feeling kind of intimidated by it. It was just like, wow, this is happening faster than I thought, and I actually have important decisions to make in this. And so it's very liberating, but it also comes with this responsibility. And then you get on the front lines of it and you realize we're up against a lot, and it can be really overwhelming. And you look at it on scale, obviously climate change, and you went to school for this, so you chose to learn about how serious it is. And myself too. It's like I went to U of M. I studied sustainability with Mike Schreiberg, who's now the director of the Michigan NWF chapter. And I worked for the Center for Sustainable Systems, researching climate. And this was 2001, 2000. And I did all this research, and I thought, oh, all of the data is here. We're going to make significant changes about this because this is an imminent threat. And anyone who looks at it the way that I just did is going to recognize it. Here we are 24 years later from when I did that research, and it's much worse in some ways. And then there are other ways where it's so much better, and people are so much more aware, and the veil is being lifted. So it can be messy work. It can also be the most meaningful work. And I imagine myself pursuing a life of stadium tours, working with Live Nation and these big corporate entities. It's like, I couldn't do that. I honestly just couldn't do it. Even if I had the opportunity, that's not my role. I know I have friends who do that, and it's beautiful. And I love to go to a big concert. And I think back to some of my early experiences experiencing, music on a large scale. And it's like, yeah, that has the power for transformation. But as far as a lifestyle, I really needed to put my roots down in Michigan and try to make as big of an impact as I could here, and not sort of pull up my roots and take it all out on the road all the time. So it's I guess it's a constant seeking of balance that I think everybody is searching for in this time that we live in. We're being pushed to sort of go at a faster pace than we biologically want to. But I love what you said about staying connected to nature too, because for me, that is absolutely essential. Doing these Zooms and getting on policy meetings and, showing up like we have to do for this work is absolutely essential. But I can't sustain it if I don't go out into the swamp, if I don't, explore and connect with trees and mosses and rivers, and, get my kidneys down into go.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of the decision makers who are not voting in favor of the environment are missing. They don't live up here. They aren't experiencing the beauty that is present every day, in our woods and on our lakeshore. And so they're missing that connection. And so I think that going back to your point earlier about how, the regulators and the decision makers are also just people that, we should try and have relationships with, so that we can, be talking to them and not just be headbutting with them. In a similar way, it's really important to try and show them that connection with our earth, so that they can see it from both sides. We need to be able to look at the issues that are facing us, from a wide perspective. And I think that a lot of the decision makers, they're not able to have that connection in a lot of ways because they're overworked. They're, pushed into Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting. They don't have time to get out and go into the woods. But yeah.
Yeah, it's it's so common for people to be disconnected from the ecosystems that sustain us.
It
And
really
yet
is.
it is. And yet I've found that pretty much all of us have had life-giving experiences with nature at some point in our lives. And I can usually find a way in to find where was that? Maybe it was childhood. Maybe it was, all the way back in kindergarten when we did a field trip to our local river, but everybody has had something. And even if it's been 40, 50 years since they had that experience, it still lives somewhere in them.
Mhm.
Um, but you're right. It can be really challenging trying to work in partnership with folks who have vastly different value systems, and in some ways a whole society that has upside down values that we're trying to change, um, and and at the same time, like, to say no to the work because it's hard, we would have to live with ourselves for the rest of our lives, knowing that we chose not to do the hard work and that we weren't willing to do the work that we knew was needed, um,
Yeah.
because it was too hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank
That's,
you.
yeah.
Thank you for saying yes to the hard work, Jane.
Anytime, we all
Yeah,
have our place,
that's right.
and I think this is mine. So,
Do you have a favorite spot on Lake Superior? Do you have like a favorite place that feels like home on the shoreline?
I feel really connected to like red pine forest. And so I spend a lot of time out at the Little Presque Isle area in the forest there. Uh, it goes back to throughout my childhood, my special place was our family's cabin on a lake on the northern lower peninsula, which was red pine forest. And I love everything about the trees and the smell of the forest and the crashing of the waves. And yeah, that's usually where I go.
Mm, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, red pines. Is it filled with red pines?
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Uh, Along the lakeshore in Marquette County, there are a few spots that are red pine dominant. And yeah, if you haven't been, you should definitely check it out the next time you're up here.
I will. I love all trees, but red pines have their own energy. It's a really different feeling being around red pines than white pines or cedars. And I live in an ecotone where it's a merging of two ecosystems. So
Okay.
I have a bunch of red pines behind me and then a cedar swamp below me. And then there's a maple valley even further. So I get to hang out with different communities, different benevolent societies of the forest, the trees.
That's
And
wonderful.
red pines love sandy soils. So
Yep.
that's a really cool thing about their personality.
Yeah. Yeah. They're really wonderful. I don't know.
Yeah. So, in closing here, Jane, are there any calls to action, ways that people can be more involved with your organization as you prepare to take on these, I guess it's a whole new stage of action points of yeah, camp.
Yeah, so I would say there are a few ways to get involved with CSCLS. We um, try to be pretty active in our communications. So whether it's through following us on social media or signing up for our email list, um, we'll try and get the word out to you about these issues that we're focused on. Um, a lot of we are a very local organization, so our efforts are really right now really centered in Marquette County. We do hope to expand our efforts, to the Lake Superior watershed in the UP, because as we've talked about, these issues are in more than just Marquette County, and we need to care about them because Lake Superior is connected throughout. But yeah, so I would say sign up for the email list, follow us on social media. If you're able to support our work financially, that is always amazing. And we will have some volunteer opportunities coming up this summer. So I would just encourage people to be on the lookout for that. And to just, it's a hard one, but it's just to stay informed. You know, we are part of a larger coalition of groups working to protect this environment. We're close friends with the Yellow Dog Watershed Preserve, who, helped a lot of that work fighting the Kennecott Eagle Mine. And, UPEC as well takes a really important seat at the table. And just supporting other groups like that is a really important way to support us as well.
Great. Well, thank you again for your work, and looking forward to continuing to collaborate and carry it forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. I am thinking about trying to make it to the earthwork harvest gathering this
Great.
year. I know Randy spoke very highly of it. So
You
it
want to
sounds
have a table there?
nice. Oh, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We call it Action Alley, and everybody
Oh,
who attends Harvest Gathering has to walk through Action Alley, and they're surrounded by nonprofits with tables. So it's a lot of social justice in the environment.
okay. Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Great.
Sure.
And we could talk about maybe doing a workshop or a panel too. We always have lots of workshops and panels on movement work and clean water.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds amazing.
All
I would
right.
talk more
Making
about it.
deals in the podcast.
Sweet.
Great.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Seth. I really appreciate all the work you do in covering all of these issues. It's inspiring.
Thank you. It's a
Thank you.
real honor, and I learn so much, and I make new friends all the time. So it's really a dream gig, the podcast. And I am so grateful to our listeners too for their curiosity and willingness to learn and to take action and support this work for the common good that really does require all of us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, onward.
All right. Sounds good.